When you think of the Golden State Warriors dynasty, players like Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and even Kevin Durant come to mind as the stars of that historic roster. But what if I told you it was journeyman power forward David Lee who laid the groundwork for that dynasty? As well as the modern stretch five. And if that's the case, then what happened, and why has he been largely forgotten about? The truth is, honestly, a little sad. Let's get deep into this, but before going straight to the content, here is the brand new information on the channel. 3 lucky winners will get a chance to win a PS5. You just have to comment on your views on this video in the comment section below. Let's start today's topic. It's been over a decade since David Lee first donned the Warriors blue and gold. But to fully understand why David Lee was so important to what the Warriors were trying to accomplish, we have to go even farther back. David Lee was a stud in high school, and it was difficult to stay in front of him in the paint, as only a handful of basketball players are left-handed, making him feel almost unnatural to guard. David Lee used this to his advantage, developing a nasty low-post package with spins and fakes that allowed him to nab McDonald's All-American honors his senior year of high school. David had plenty of eyes on him even then. And some even say that his success at Chaminade College Prep in St. Louis directly helped Jason Tatum and Bradley Beal get recognized years later when they went to school there. If you haven't already watched the video of how Stephen Curry convinced the world, click the I button to watch it. David Lee turned that All-American bid into a successful college career in Florida, where he played under current Chicago Bulls coach Billy Donovan, who helped him become second-team All-SEC his junior and senior years with respectable numbers of 11.3 points and 6.8 rebounds his last 2 years with the Gators. Although it seemed like David was a lock to make it to the league. Especially in 2005, when big men were essential to every NBA roster, he slipped down to the last pick in the first round, when the perpetually rebuilding Knicks snatched him up to pair him with Stephon Marbury. David, standing at just 6'9" and lacking a lot of athleticism, played most of his early NBA days as a power forward. But many think that he would have had a much more celebrated career had he played just a few years later. Something the Warriors even figured out, but we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit. David Lee owes a lot of his success to Knicks coach Mike D'Antoni, who took over in 2008 and immediately saw the potential that Lee had. Mike D'Antoni had just gotten done revolutionized the way offenses were handled in Phoenix in the last few years, and saw an opportunity to unleash David Lee as a matchup nightmare for traditional centers. Lee went from backing up Eddie Curry, who Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant couldn't stand looking at because of his bad shape, to averaging 18 points and 11.7 rebounds per game in his first 2 seasons with D'Antoni and never looked back. The next year, David made the All-Star team out east with a 20-point, 11-rebound season in which it felt like nobody could stay with the lefty. He was cooking dudes on the low side and was on autopilot from the mid-range. As the Knicks' original point center, he was even running the fast break. So that's all well and good, but what happened? You said this was heartbreaking, right? Well, the next year he essentially got traded so that Mike D'Antoni could reunite with Amar'e Stoudemire. Which couldn't have felt good for David Lee, who was playing the best ball of his career and finally had a coach who understood his game. Things kind of soured eventually with the Warriors, but a lot of people forget how solid he was for the first 4 years of his stay with a very young Steph Curry and company. David's numbers dipped from when he was an all-star with the Knicks, but only slightly, and Lee was a steadying force every night for a young Golden State team, averaging 18.2 points and 10 rebounds a night for a team on the cusp of greatness. Lee even got a second All-Star nod during the 2012-13 season, when he had another consistent year with 18.5 points and 11 rebounds. Consistency is sometimes a dirty word in the NBA, especially when evaluating a player's trajectory. But David Lee was legitimately a top player at his position for a stretch, even if he didn't get the accolades that players with flashier styles possessed. Lee had that sweet lefty stroke that fans love to see, but the NBA was becoming more about guard play and less about forcing the ball into the lane. During the 2014-15 season, the Warriors moved David Lee, now in only his 9th NBA season, to the bench, where he would remain for the rest of his short career. Lee was replaced technically by Andrew Bogut, who once again was the top choice. Over him and probably was a grim reminder that things hadn't changed that much since draft day, despite Lee having a tremendous career compared to his expectations. What David Lee brought in, though, were Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green, who would play the 4 and 5 in what was the first iteration of the death lineup, which was even scarier to play against than it was to say. David Lee's utility as a scorer and rebounder just wasn't needed anymore. Especially since Draymond Green had developed into just as good, if not a better, playmaker and defender, because, you don't win Defensive Player of the Year just for showing up. David would win his first and only ring from the bench that year, sporadically playing but often watching entire games from the bench during their playoff run. The NBA is a business, and as much as everyone loved David as a guy and respected him for helping them dig themselves out of the gutters of the West in the 2010s, he just wasn't a fit for the Warriors' style, and as the league shifted to a more open, switching the style of defense, Lee found himself too slow to keep up, and GMs couldn't justify giving him a spot even for his scoring. Since he was a liability on the other end, David finished his career as a journeyman big man, splitting the 2015-16 season with the Celtics and Mavericks but failing to reach double digits in scoring. He ended his career in San Antonio, which some were excited to see play out because David fit that Popovich mold to a T. The lefty big was solid but couldn't stay healthy enough to find his rhythm, with past injuries to his hand and wrist bothering him. He would play his last game in the Western Conference Finals against his former team, the Golden State Warriors, where he would rip his patellar tendon in his knee and not be able to return before the Spurs were eliminated. It seemed like the writing was on the wall, and Lee walked away gracefully before things got any uglier than they had to be. The story of David Lee is a sad one since ultimately he helped create what would eventually shut the door on his career. You can point to injuries or how poorly the Knicks were run, hurting his development. But David Lee was a really solid power forward whose step into a more modern center led to Draymond Green replacing him at the 5, and in the league's attempt to catch up, David ended up being left behind. Too small and skilled to be a valuable big man in his era and too unathletic to succeed when the league shifted towards the stretch 4, Lee was a man caught in the middle. And, unfortunately, was a victim of circumstance. What do you think of David Lee? Do you feel bad for the guy, or do you think he just got unlucky? Do let us know in the comments section below and get a chance to win a brand new PS5. If you enjoyed watching the video, do like and share it, and yes, don't forget to hit that notification bell. Thank you so much.